Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Christina Neal, and it is my pleasure to be hosting you today with our special guest, Nick Blam. Welcome to another Boom Startup online program. Today's topic is something that is extremely important, especially if you're going to be developing your product soon. Just like all other Boom Startup programs, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and I will ask Nick the questions at an appropriate time, like when there's a break or a breathing moment. I would like to say a special thank you to today's sponsor for our session, Outcode Software. Outcode Software provides innovative software solutions to help startups grow, and Nick will be elaborating on this a little more pretty soon as well. So if you are new to the Boom Startup community, thank you so much for joining us. We are an open and opt-in accelerator, very unlike other accelerators. Our online platform will track your business development and make suggestions for the growth of your business. We are committing to giving startups that aha moment. When the timing is right and we have interested investment opportunities in your startup, we will also invite you to our investment community to help you get prepared for funding. We are a global accelerator, and we have participants from all over the world. We were founded in the US, so primarily our clients are in the US, but we are expanding rapidly. We also work with companies that span from many different industries and different business models, including EdTech, B2B, B2C, health tech, FinTech, and many, many others. How we measure success is not if you can lose funding or not, but if you can find your own capital. We hold a variety of different programs that you can jump in as they are open and opt in to help you with this. The more programs that you participate in, the more that we can track and vouch for your company and its growth. We also have the incredible and exciting opportunity to help you fund up to $100,000 in your pre-seed round. Additionally, we deliver success through funding-oriented programs, and we also track your business startup growth through our platform as well as our mentoring. We are also a fantastic resource for pre-seed investment patterns. We offer unique, flexible, and open investment rounds that not only are we investing in, but it's also open to other investors thanks to Assure's SPVs. Assure is our parent company, and they are the leading SPV in financial services. All right, so we have 4 main programs here at Boom Startup. You're actually participating in one of our OpenUp programs, which are generally about an hour-long webinar that discusses a specific business topic. We also have our Pitch Up competitions, which is a twice-a-year competition that highlights companies that are improving our future. We also hold Rise Up Sprints that are 1-week-long online immersive programs that go through a specific business problem, and it creates an individualized action plan to resolve it for your startup. And of course, we have our Amplify Up program, which is our funding program. This is where we prepare you for funding. But with no further ado, I would like to introduce you to the founder and CEO of Outcode Software, Nick Blam. Nick is going to talk to us about MVPs and their developmental best practices. So I'm going to send the screen over to you, Nick, and you can take it away. Just give me 1 second. Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me come and share my thoughts. I've got a little presentation that I'm going to pull up, but I do want this be a little bit interactive. I talk more than I write, so my presentations will continue to advance as we go along, but I'll quickly share my screen and we'll dive into it. If you have questions along the way, please do put it into the chat. I'll try and monitor that. I know these remote sessions can be hard as we've all transitioned from COVID and trying to figure out if we quite like these or not, but I know for a big part for me, I learned through asking questions. So please don't shy away from asking questions and seeking clarification as we go along. I also have a tendency to try and be a little bit more theoretical or detailed than I need to be. So if I'm not being clear, just let me know and I'll restate. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we're going to get this thing going here. I want to make sure this is going to work the way we need it to. So go ahead and let me know. Christine. I'm just getting
Awesome.
thumbs up
I'm
before
certain to see
sharing
it.
here.
Yep.
Perfect. Awesome.
Great.
Okay. So we'll give you a quick just introduction of who we are, Outcode. Outcode is a product-focused technology services company. I've started the company back in 2016. Really, we take a product-focused approach to software development and the related services, because what we want to do is really drive the highest ROI for our clients as possible. And today's topic is obviously about MVP best practices, and we're going to get into that in a minute. A lot of the times, I have a little bit of imposter syndrome, so I always put out certain disclaimers as to, who is this guy? So this is my disclaimer. Everything I share, I love to speak from experience. I don't consider myself the world-renowned expert. I don't consider myself more experienced or more wise than many of the amazing people in the industry. But what I do have from experience, I continue to try and define and understand and really try to speak from my experience in ways that are going to help other entrepreneurs, other business owners, other people drive world-changing products that really are going to drive change of quality of life, improvement in business, success. And so I'm going to share some different ideas from industry popular works, trends, or concepts. I'll reference those as we go along. But take everything I say as this is my experience and my learning lessons from either my past, or I'm currently still coming up with these, or these are my thoughts and opinions of where the industry is going, or best practices of where we can go into the future. So that's my little disclaimer. I was born and raised in Utah, just in the Salt Lake City Valley. Probably never going to leave. I love it there. I'm married with 2 kids, a 4-month-old that keeps me wide awake in the middle of the night. I love going outdoors, and I really love entrepreneur lifestyle. I just love being an entrepreneur. I love everything about entrepreneurism. So, I'm probably a little bit too in love with it. It's almost my hobby. And at the end of the day, I love technology. So that's a little bit about who I am. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of reasons like, well, who is this guy and why is he talking to us? So today we're going to dive in a little bit into MVP best practice. I'm going to do my little plug here and cough, cough, MSP. We're going to talk about what an MSP is in relation to product in the future. But as we dive in, try and be a little bit on time here too. As we dive in here, what is a MVP? It's a minimum viable product. There's the definition came out kind of in the early 2000s, but it really became popular with a man named Eric Ries, who is the author of the book, The Lean Startup. And so I prefer to use his definition because I think it's probably the most accurate. Whenever you're building a technology product or any kind of product, you'll hear this term MVP, and it's kind of one of those things that was defined a long time ago, and people have sort of taken liberty to kind of change. It's a telephone game of what's happening. And so I like to go back to the source and say, okay, what was this thing and what was the essence of it? And then you can understand how it's changed over time, either for better or for worse, or if it's missed some of its its true essence. And so, the minimum viable product is that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. This is the way that Eric Ries defined it. If you want to go look it up, there's a blog post in his company, leanstartup.co, right there. What is an MVP? If you just Google that, it'll pop right up. And he's got a video. He talks a lot about MVPs as well. And as you hear that, it may, for me, as I refreshed my memory of it, about a year and a half ago, it was a little jarring because what I had always heard was an MVP is the minimum amount of work you need to do so someone can use your product. And I was like, this takes a very different sort of essence spin on that. Like there's some very key words. It's the maximum amount of validated learning about customers. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to learn about your customers. You're trying to understand who they are, what they like to use with the least effort. Now that means the goal of an MVP is to collect validated learning about your customers. The goal of your MVP is not to spend as little as possible. It's not to cut as many corners as possible. Those are elements, and we're going to talk about that. But the true goal, in essence, is to say, how do I learn about my customers? That's what a minimum viable product is. And so, the Lean Startup was a book that's written by Eric Ries. If you haven't read it and you're an entrepreneur, I highly recommend it. It speaks a lot more about how to run great lean startup, lean methodologies, MVPs, better than I can even. But there's a couple highlights with that, and that's technology products in specific, and most products or projects can be very capital intensive, as we all know, much like starting a business. And so where lean and agile methodologies come into play is by leveraging them to improve the ROI through learning along the way with reduced waste. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to learn along the way. And that's where agile, an agile manifesto comes in. And you're trying to reduce waste, which is where lean comes in. And the reason these are, becoming more and more best practices or industry trends is because of the capital intensive nature of starting a business, specifically a product business or a technology product business. If you were going to do something that wasn't capital intensive, then maybe the minimum viable product or a lean or agile methodology isn't right for you. And so that's something to be aware of as you're thinking about your business. Is it capital intensive? Is that a trait of your company? And if it's not, ask yourself why. I'm going to talk a lot about asking yourself why. Why is agile or why is lean maybe the better path for me, and maybe it isn't. And so there's a lot of things we could roll through there, but I have seen too often entrepreneurs or people coming into the industry, pick up a trend or pick up a term and say, well, that's the way I need to do it. And I would challenge everybody to say, ask yourself why you should do it that way before you just jump on that wagon, because at the end of the day, there are projects where waterfall methodologies are much higher ROIs, or where, not trying to stay lean, but really investing forward is the path that you should take. And so, again, thinking through that is an important element of understanding what an MVP is and if it's right for you and your business. There's also some important trade-offs. This comes from the Agile Alliance. Agile Alliance is an organization out there that talks about Agile and the Agile Manifesto. And if you dig into their MVP definition in their glossary, there's some important learning lessons that come out of that. A minimum viable product, because the goal is to maximize validated learning, it welcomes failure. No one learns perfectly without failing in some way, right? You need to learn how to not do it sometimes to learn how to do it. And that means that because the goal is to learn, a minimum viable product by nature is going to welcome failure, right? While also reducing overhead. And so many times this can mean that an MVP should be considered strategically at the business level or at the executive level as something that could be changed, abandoned, or completely rebuilt. And this is jarring for many business owners or many product people. They're like, well, what do you mean? We might build a product and then completely leave it later? We might just throw it away? Yes, you might. And that's an element of what building a minimum viable product is. You want to try and reduce overhead as part of that process. And some of the overhead that you reduce may be necessary as you scale your product into the future, or as you learn lessons about what your customers care about. And so by nature, because you're reducing overhead and learning along the way, again, there is a trade-off in taking this path. And it typically comes into the form of, we built something and we had to change it. We built it and we were halfway through building it and then we stopped, or we built it and it needed to be rebuilt because we made other learning lessons along the way of how we should have built it. And so again, these are some important elements on MVP overall. Don't look like we have any chat, so we're going to move on to the next page. So world-class products. So we're talking about minimum viable products. And at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about is product. So what makes world-class product? I would argue that what makes world-class product is world-class product people and teams. And I had this fun little animation planned, didn't quite get to it, but I'll talk through what this diagram is trying to talk about. Starting in the top left, and then we're going to go clockwise. When you go hire a product person or you are a product person, it is a given that you should understand how to build products. And we call that the product lifecycle. That's a given. It's your job description. It's in your job title. You're a product person or a product owner, product manager, product executive. You should understand how to build products. It's also probably somewhat given that if you're building a certain type of product, you should have some sort of domain expertise on how to build that product. So if you're building a t-shirt company, you should probably know how t-shirts are made and what is going on in t-shirt land. If you're building a software product, you should understand technology and understand what's going on in the technology industry. And so I think that's true of great product people. Two things that many people don't understand or don't add to what makes a great product team member or a product team is also market theory. And so market theory is understanding how do market forces influence people's decisions and where there's opportunities. When you hear it that way, you're like, well, yeah, you need to know that, but it's important to remember that, you know, all technical people might not be product people. All marketing people might not be product people. It's this mix that starts to create truly great product teams. And so if you can understand where the reaching demand is, ultimately you can build products that are going to be adopted. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along as well. The other part that many people feel like is something that's like, hey, I don't need you guys to understand that. Just build me a product, is the business model and the finances. Because again, ultimately we want the product to be adopted, but the product's being built by someone. And usually that's a business. And usually that business has some needs, it has some objectives. Even a nonprofit, you know, their objective isn't profitability or making money. It's driving the impact the nonprofit is trying to make. And so having product people that understand business models and how businesses work and how the business finances work allows them to make product decisions that support the business rather than just building really, really cool products. And so what we found is, you know, and this is really credited to a man named Richard Tripp, who has a great product mastermind, great advisor and mentor of mine. You know, ultimately, you know, this has come through many conversations with him, but something that he learned early on in his career, that great product people or great product teams have this sort of overlapping, you know, experience and skill set that really drives great products. And you can do that through individual people that have all four of these, and their backgrounds may be diverse. You have product people that come from business, you have product people that come from engineering, you have product people that come from music, you have product people that come from, you know, English writing. They have very diverse backgrounds, but it's because of their backgrounds and the diversity of those backgrounds, they're able to truly achieve a good understanding of all four of these areas. And they've sort of centralized it into how do I build great products? And so really, ultimately, great product starts with great product people because that's who's building it. What else goes into world-class product? Successful products are adopted products. If you're not familiar with, you know, the hype curve that Gartner puts out, you know, it's crazy to think or imagine how many great products or technologies are just buried in the trough of despair, which if you're not familiar with the trough of despair, it's things, you know, new technology, new product comes out, it gets really exciting, and then they can't quite figure out how to get it adopted in a mass way. And it kind of just dies there. You know, they bury it, they dig a grave and they put it in the ground and it sits in some, you know, shelf somewhere and gathers dust, because even though it may be a great product, it may be a great technology, maybe a great feature, it didn't get adopted in the way that it needed to be. And so as you think about, you know, what creates adopted products, here at Outcode, or at least from my side, I talk a lot about a minimum sellable product. And I've talked about this a little bit in the Boom Startup community before, but I wanted to quickly highlight it in this conversation. A minimum sellable product is the version of a product that meets the minimum requirements for initial target audience to invest in using the product, and ultimately will achieve the business objectives within the available resource limitations. Like I said, I'm a ones and zeros guy, so words aren't my forte, but there's 3 highlights there. The initial target audience you're looking at is going to invest in using the product. And investment can look a few different ways. It can be they're investing their time, investing their attention, investing their actual money because they're going to purchase the product. Whatever investment there is should drive the traction you need to meet your business objective. And that's the second highlight, is that a minimum sellable product needs to get you to whatever your next business objective is. If it doesn't do that, it didn't quite serve its purpose. And then the other highlight there is that it needs to do it within the available resource limitations, which is why that word minimum is there as well. It can't be, well, it's going to blow through our, business objectives because we have unlimited resources. That's usually not a characteristic of most businesses. So you're looking at the resource limitations that you have, how to get the target audience to really invest in using the product, not just give you feedback, but invest in using it in some way. And that investment is driving the business objective that you have to the next stage. And as you go along, what you'll find is that the business objectives will progress. They'll get bigger, they'll change. So your minimum sellable product, that version will continue to adapt to the needs of the business that you have. What I've found is, why is this important? Okay, well, why? All you did was switch out a word, and viable, sellable. Okay, we were all thinking the same thing. What I have found in my experience is that many times a minimum viable product, something that was built to just get people using it as quick as possible and just to get some feedback, many times the MVP was created, it creates a version of the product that promotes use, right? It gets people using it, but it may not create enough traction for the business to progress. And so I've seen so many entrepreneurs and so many businesses or products get to market, get out there and get used, but not quite achieve where they needed to get to. And so they take a very long time to sort of bootstrap their way to their business objective. And it takes a significant amount of time, or they never get there and the product in the business dies because they've ran out of the limited resources they had to get to an MVP and weren't able to get more resources by meeting their business objectives to get to a minimum sellable product so they could continue to drive traction with their target audience. And so there's, again, some key concepts there that are worth talking about. What is your target audience objective and need? You want to be clear about that. What is the need you're filling? What is their objective? And is the minimum sellable product doing that for them, more efficiently or more effectively, which is what drives your core differentiator, right? Just because it's a minimal use product doesn't mean that they're willing to invest their time in using it, because there may be an alternative, and the investment into the alternative may be more worthwhile to your target audience than to, use your product. And so what is your core differentiator, right? How do you deliver that target audience objective and need in a more efficient or effective way? You'll hear me use those words a lot. What is efficiency? I'll just kind of quickly define it. Efficiency is I put less in and get more out, right? I put less in, I get more out. Effectiveness is for what I put in, I'm getting better results, right? So the effectiveness of what I put in is getting me more output. And so efficiency is about using less. Effectiveness is about getting more from the output. Anyways, you want to look at your core differentiator. And so is it more efficient or is it more effective? And then what you want to look at is you want to look at the motivation to change, right? So just because you have a product that meets your objective or meet your customers' objectives and needs. Just because you have that doesn't mean they're motivated to change. The pain of staying the same has to be greater than moving to whatever your product is. And so what is your motivator? What is the motivation to move to your product? And it can be a variety of things. It could be that you look better. It could be that you have a better relationship. It could be that your product is truly better, and there's lots of testimonials that prove that. But there's ultimately going to be some motivation that you want to be aware of as you talk about a minimum sellable product that you want to bake into your product, or you want to bake into your product marketing, so that you can truly drive adoption. Okay, so we're going to move forward, and we're going to skip a little bit about, we're going to talk about customer feedback for a minute. And I'm going to use a totally overused video. But the purpose of the video is that he was great and he built the most successful product in history. And so I'm going to pull that up, and we're going to watch it just for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what he talked about. So I'm going to pull that up.
I would like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how.
Okay, so just to give some context to this video, it's grainy, it's an old video, but what's happening here is Steve Jobs is sitting in front of a large group of people that are allowed to ask him questions. And a man is going to stand up, and you'll hear some chuckling, because this man is a very technical advocate of a competing technology to Apple. And he's going to stand up, he's going to ask Steve Jobs a question. And I want you to pay attention to Steve Jobs' responses and the words that he's using to explain why it is Apple's doing what it's doing.
This is the best. This is the best.
Yes.
Mr. Jobs, you're a bright and influential man.
Here it comes.
It's sad and clear that on several counts you've discussed, you don't know what you're talking about. I would like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how, say, Java, in any of its incarnations, addresses the ideas embodied in OpenUp. And when you're finished with that, perhaps you could tell us what you personally have been doing for the last 7 years.
You can please some of the people some of the time, but one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas. I'm sure that there are some things OpenDoc does, probably even more that I'm not familiar with, that nothing else out there does. And I'm sure that you can make some demos, maybe a small commercial app that demonstrates those things. The hardest thing is, how does that fit in to a cohesive, larger vision that's going to allow you to sell $8 billion, $10 billion of product a year? And one of the things I've always found is that you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that. And I think that's the right path to take. I remember
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Go ahead and reshare. So again, there's, look, nobody built, Steve Jobs built one of the most successful products in the world. And you'll notice that he highlighted some important things along the way. Some things I always take away from that video. You can please some of the people some of the time. You can't even please some of the people all of the time. And that's an important takeaway for minimum sellable products. If your goal is to go create a product that is going to be adopted by everyone on the planet, your target audience is probably a little bit too big. You need to think about who are the sum of people I'm going to please, and how often do I need to please them to get them to adopt my product. And that's going to really help guide what you're building into your minimum sellable product. Ultimately, Steve Jobs was, really well known for, talking about how, if people had asked him for a better phone, he would have done another flip phone, right? Like if you asked somebody, how they wanted to travel back when there were horses, they would have given them a faster horse, right? And this idea of innovation, saying not 100% of the time does the market or the customers know how to tell you what they want, as far as a solution or a product goes, but they can tell you what they need and what the experience is that they're having. And innovation can play in to truly drive, world-class products. And so what we found is ultimately you are a business and you have customers and you need to drive adoption, but innovation and customer feedback have to drive adoption together. They have to drive adoption together. When you start driving a large organization with lots of products and a product portfolio, typically we'll actually split the roadmap, and we'll talk a little bit about roadmaps today, but we'll split it up. We'll say this is stuff that came from customers and customer needs. And this is our product vision. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is our big why, or our big idea that we are trying to drive forward better than anyone else. And we try and prioritize a little bit of both along the way so that we never quite lose track of where we're going and what we're trying to do as an organization, but we also are serving our customers along the way. And when you're building an MVP, the key in understanding what to prioritize or what to do, how much innovation or how much customer feedback you should be bringing in, is the key in building an MVP or a minimum sellable product is understanding how to prioritize it. So backing up a little bit here really quickly, talking about resources. Again, it is a natural reality of startups, of building products, that they are capital intensive and there's limited resources. We don't have unlimited resources in most cases. And so, here at Outcode, we are developing more and more of what we call kind of our project management triangle 2.0 in relation to software development specifically. But if you're not familiar with the project management triangle, time, budget, scope, these are trade-offs, and you're always trying to find that happy medium with what you have. These are resources that are limited in some way or another, and you need to understand those limitations and what you're willing to trade off. In software development, we see that really as risk, quality, and resources, or task availability, and skill. And so you can really start to drive, a different level of analysis if you overlay just the simple time, budget, scope with some of these other potentially available resources that you're trying to determine. I mean, if you're building a hard good, one of your resources could truly be the raw goods to create it. And that's something you need to take into consideration. And so if you overlay and you analyze where you're making trade-offs and you understand that, hey, this specific resource has dependencies on these other resources, you can start to understand where the trade-offs are going to be best for you and best for your business, best for your product. It's a big thing that we do here at Outcode on the software development side. But overall, I don't want to dive too deep into it because we've covered it in the past with, product driving revenue, and I'll probably end up doing even more in the future on this. But overall, the highlight on your resources is recognize that they're limited and understand that when you make a trade-off, as much as we all want to have our cake and eat it too, that trade-off potentially has consequences, and you need to weigh those consequences against your business objectives to understand if it's truly the right trade-off for you. And so I'll skip forward again really quickly, past the customer feedback here, and get into prioritization. And so, really, if we got to like the nitty-gritty of like, hey, I've got an MVP, or I got a product idea, and I need to get it out there. I want it to be successful. I want it to be adopted. I want to build that minimum sellable product. You kind of the rubber's got to hit the road somewhere. You got to start somewhere. And for me, that really starts with critical path and road mapping. What is a critical path? The idea is if my user objective is to log into a system, they need to be able to access my thing. You may have some steps along the way. And I wanted to kind of use a little bit of a, annotation here. So let's see if this will work. But, in a perfect world, you might want your critical path to look something like this, right? Like, hey, I just want step 1, step 2, step 3, and we're good. We got to where we needed to get to, right? I mean, that's what I want. I want simple, right? But especially in software or in complex products, your critical path looks a lot more like the image on the screen. And, there's a couple offshoots that may happen. There may be 3 different critical paths because there's 3 or 4 different objectives that are really going to drive adoption for your product. And so what you end up having is this sort of chaotic, sort of path to getting to the objectives. What we have found is best is getting visual and mapping it out this way. This is a what's called like a PERT diagram or a network diagram. Some people call them a node diagram. But getting into this exercise early on, even before deciding what to build, can be super helpful to not focus on things that are unnecessary. No one thought that the login experience for a website would change. It was like you go in, you put your email, you put your password, you may need a forgot password, you may do these things. And then really cool organizations like Slack said, no, there's an easier path. You're going to put your email in, we're going to send you a link, you're going to click the link, and you're going to be logged in. That's it. You don't got to worry about password management. You don't got to worry about forgetting your password. We're just going to send you a link, you're going to click it, and you're going to log in. So again, ask yourself why. Put the beginning, from the first step to the objectives that you're trying to accomplish, and just start. Like, don't overthink it. Just say step 1, step 2, step 3. Map it out this way. Hey, sometimes you got to do that. It's a little bit of an offshoot here. And then go in and start doing your 5 why exercise, right? Say, do you really need to do that? Like, is that necessary? Or is there a better way? Can we take a different path? Can we combine paths so that you achieve both objectives in a single flow rather than 2 separate flows? Think about what your customer experience is and what your user is having to go through to achieve their objectives, and be critical about it before deciding this is what I need to build. And so this critical path exercise is ultimately, again, you want a simple path. You want as few steps as possible, or in general, you will want as few steps as possible without sacrificing controls, obviously, and I'm getting into some weeds there, but the idea is you want the optimal path for each objective. And, typically that's going to look like a clean path with minimal amount of steps. And so taking the first draft and mapping it out, getting on a whiteboard, getting on a piece of paper, being visual, and then being critical of each part and saying, you know what, I feel like we could do this step better and reduce it or combine it, is a really important first step of understanding what your product's supposed to do. From there, you're going to have all these nodes and these feature sets. And And ultimately, you're going to have to say, okay, well, I've got all these things that I need to do. I need to put it into a roadmap. I've got my annotation's still there. Get away. Here we go. Clear. There we go. So road mapping, for some reason, has this really, heated conversation in today's world around products and agile. People are like, well, if you roadmap it and you follow certain phases, then you're really more waterfall and you're not truly being agile. You're not truly being open to change. The reality is, in my experience, businesses have resources and objectives. And so I've got a few rules of road mapping that help incentivize, learning and iteration while not sacrificing the business planning and strategy that ultimately needs to drive where the product goes. And so one of the first rules is you always want to tie a feature set or whatever is on your roadmap, the thing you're going to go build, to a business or a product objective. Some examples of business objectives are we need to sell 100 customers, or we need to onboard this major enterprise customer. Maybe another business objective is we need to improve client satisfaction. We need to capture more market share. All kinds of things could be business objectives. We need to raise money. We need to get traction, right? All kinds of different things that could be a business objective. You could also have a product objective, which is, hey, we need to reduce downtime. It needs to be more stable. Or, you know what, we need to build product less expensively. We need to do something so that we can build product with less budget. Another product objective may be we don't want to rework product. We want it to be more, bug free, more defect free. All kinds of different product objectives, but most objectives are either going to fit into the business or product arena. And the important thing at a roadmap level is you're staying high level. You're not getting into the nitty gritty details of how you're building the product or the specific specs. You're staying at a feature set or an overall objective level, and you're tying it to a business or a product objective. It's key that you do that because that means that it's important, right? That creates importance for that objective. You want to relate it to the entire product portfolio. And so what that means is don't think about your product in a silo. It's like, oh, this is one little thing over here in this, you want to think about how it relates to the rest of what you're doing with your products and your services. If you have an implementation team, if you offer some consulting in addition to the product that you're building, if you have a community product and you have a community that you curate and you bring people into, how does this product relate? And that can look like, coming up with categories or areas of your products, or, actually like naming your products and thinking about the things you do with your customers in that customer experience as a product themselves. You want to understand who the stakeholder was. Someone came to the table and said, I want to build this thing. It was either a business executive, a customer, maybe it was the actual engineers or the product makers themselves. Maybe it was your investors. Somebody came in and said, we should build this. Understand who they are, understand why they're asking that to be built, because that's an important element of how to prioritize it and how to build out a roadmap. Who was the requester of this thing? And then from there, focus is key. And I have a pretty simple rule. You can have one roadmap item moving forward, prioritized for one team per phase. And so, again, many different products take different phases. In software, we go from concept, R&D, prototyping, backlogging, developing. There's all these different phases. The idea is if I have one priority one in one phase assigned to that one team, they can't have another priority one. So I'll give you another example. If I have two engineering teams and I've got a whole list of things, one engineering team can have a priority in the R&D phase and a priority in the development phase. They could have both because they're different activities. They take different thought processes, and maybe they like to mix it up and work on two things at once because they don't want to just, develop all day. So you can't have two priority ones there. But if you have two things that are in the R&D phase, that team cannot, you need to focus on the roadmap level item. These are important aspects of your product that need to be done correctly. And by mixing in other priorities, all you're doing is distracting from doing the one they were focused on first, with less attention or less resources, less time. And it'll drag things out. So you don't want to have two items on the same phase for the same team. If you need to run faster, you need more teams, right? If we have 4 things into R&D and all of them have got to be priority ones, I need 4 different teams of people or 4 different people to own those 4 items so they can focus on those things and run them in parallel. And then the final thing is understanding impact and effort. And it looks like we might have had a chat here. It's time. Yeah, kind of good call out on the, I'll readdress Kenneth's point at the end on the Q&A, but you want to understand impact and effort. And so how do you understand impact and effort? Here you go. Impact can be measured using a few different methods. I'll try to speed up because I know we're short on time here. You could do real impact. You could say, my impact that I'm trying to drive is revenue, and this feature is tied to this much revenue. And it could be a real measurement of the impact that you're making. You could do weighted averages. We find that weighted averages, can make it a little bit more accurate, a little bit more realistic. And you can take, vote. You bring in the business stakeholder, or you bring in the person that brought up the issue or the feature. You bring in the person that's going to build it, engineering. You may bring in a customer advisory board or some trusted customers, and you're going to get them to rate it like 1 out of 10. How much impact does this drive for you? And then you're going to weight that average based on really who's going to drive more impact towards our business objective. You can also use traction indicators for impact, like, hey, is this getting more downloads? Is this getting more use? And what is the impact we expect to get from that traction indicator? And then from an effort standpoint, a couple rules there. It should always come from the person that's doing the work. The person that's going to do the work should always participate in estimating the effort it takes to build something on your roadmap. If you guess how far you throw a football versus how far I throw a football, you're going to be more accurate about your throw than you are going to be about mine, because I don't like football and I like soccer and I don't throw a football very well. And you might not have known that about me because I didn't share it with you before now. And so don't ever estimate effort without keeping the people, involved that are going to do the work to build the product, because then you run a risk of not being very accurate on your effort. Weighted averages can really assist in identifying unknowns. And so, while maybe an engineer is going to code the software and their effort estimation is very, very important from a weighted perspective, having other people participate in what they think the effort should be can help the engineer look back and say, or help the product person look back and say, it's odd that the investor, or the business stakeholders think it's this much effort and the engineer think it's, they think it's a 1 and the engineer thinks it's a 10. Something's mismatching. Maybe we're thinking about this incorrectly, or maybe the engineer is thinking about it incorrectly, or maybe there's some unknowns that we're unaware of on the product engineering side that the business stakeholders and the investors are aware of, and we need to go learn what that unknown is so we can align our efforts a little bit better. So, doing a weighted average exercise can really drive, identifying where there's potentially unknowns in the process. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I know I'm staying pretty high level. It was a lot of content. I thought I'd get through a little bit faster without the drilling, but ultimately, at the end of the day, there are some things that you can do to prepare to build your MVP before you even start getting into this stage. We've prepared a preparation checklist that everybody that's registered will end up receiving shortly after today's session. And it includes things like, identifying the things that we talked about today. Who's your target audience? What are you building for them? What are your business objectives? Setting goals on your business objectives so that you're not just coming to a person and saying, well, you tell me what it's going to take to build it, but really, having some intention, but also really starting to get into a little bit more detail around what the feature sets or the user stories are for your product. We here at Outcode, we work on products, everything from ideation to to ongoing development of products and big product portfolios. If you are feeling like, hey, I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around this, we do offer a free exploration session. You can come meet with our product team, talk to us about where your product's at. We're more than happy to do a free session with you guys and some work on our side to kind of point you in the right direction. or potentially be part of your product development, journey. And so my contact information is here. Feel free to reach out, but hopefully today's content was, valuable and educational, and you were able to take something away from my experience and what I've learned over the years building, many different products for many different companies, and apply it to what you're doing in your own journeys. My network is your network. Wherever we can assist you from my network and my resources, we're here to help you guys be successful, because again, I love entrepreneurs. I love what we're doing. I love people that are out there trying to change the world through world-class products. So thanks for letting me talk today. And I think we'll have a little bit of time for some Q&A, but Christine, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was a lot of amazing content. I personally even learned a lot. So does anybody have any questions for Nick?
Yeah, it's Ken. My comment wasn't about that we were under time constraint. It was that, you were, what is it that I'm saving what am I doing for someone? If I'm saving somebody 3 hours of their wasted time, I think that that's a pretty huge value proposition, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. As far as a motivator goes, like if you're saving somebody time is everyone's most valuable resource. You can't get it back, And so again, I found that like what happens many times, Kenneth, is like you go build the product and like that's known. You're like, we're saving people time. And then somehow like the rest of the company or the rest of the organization like didn't get the memo, right? It's like, why is our marketing material not say we're saving you time, And so even before you get to the minimum sellable product or minimum viable product, like getting that clear and, making sure everybody is aware, like that's the thing that's going to get people to come over, can save just like a lot of effort across different departments and teams, because, it'll make the product more focused. It'll help you. We have a client, a group that we worked with, and they found that one of the biggest motivators was that they just had the good looking product. They just looked better. Like it just was attractive. It was an attractive product. And when they were trying to determine what resources to spend, they're like, well, maybe we should cut the design budget. And it was a very clear no, because one of the main motivators for them was how great their product looked. And so they knew if they cut design budget down, what they were really doing was crippling their ability to convince people to come on and adopt the product. And so, being purposeful and clear and concise and strategic with what those motivators are, time is a great one. Can really it can save a lot of time and headache and budget.
Awesome. Well, we also have another question in the chat for Nick, and it is: what strategies would you think of when building an MVP for B2C versus B2B companies?
Oh, this is a great question. So I'm going to speak from experience on this one, because honestly, I've realized that my experience is a little bit heavier on the B2B side, but we've had more and more experience recently on the B2C or B2C similar models. And one of the things I've realized is that traction looks very different for the different products. Most of the time, especially in the investment community, traction in B2B world looks like revenue. In the B2C world, it looks like mass adoption, right? Like we don't want, 100 customers on a B2B software is not the same thing as 100 customers on a B2C. And so I think that's one of the things you have to think about is, how do I, what does your onboarding process look like? How do you, the B2C realm, you need some width. You need a lot of volume compared to most of the time, unless you're in a what I would call like a high tier or high price, high ticket product where, you're able to get a lot of revenue traction. Most B2C products are not high ticket. And so, what we found is, that's an important element of building the minimum viable or the minimum sellable product. The other thing that's important to note is that like the minimum sellable product is great, but then if there's a lot of width that you need for adoption, you truly have to, you got to consider what the sales and marketing expenses of getting wide audience attention. And so when you're evaluating your resources and your budgets and your timelines, don't discount how much you're going to need to invest in getting out there. In my experience, don't expect to go viral. Plan ahead on what it's going to take to go get in front of thousands of people, not tens of people, because that's going to, really what I think in my experience, what I've seen is, it's somewhat correlated or whatever, that really successful B2C products are simple products. I think there's some relation there, because really what they did is they built a very simple product that they could then put a lot of effort getting out there and explaining simply to a lot of different people. And I think that's an element of B2C that you have to take into consideration versus B2B. B2B, you got to think about so many different things: compliance, scalability, security, things that businesses care about. And you have to tie it to a business need. A B2C need is, food, shelter, relationship, emotions, time. Like, there's all these things that happen as a consumer. Businesses have needs too. It's either impact or saved costs or, revenue, profit, whatever it is. So you got to be clear about what the need is you're trying to solve. And there are different needs. On the business side, you have a user and they have their own user need, but ultimately the person writing the check is someone from a business, and it needs to fill a business need, or you run the risk of, finance coming in and cutting the budget for the tool because it's not filling their strategic or their procedural needs. So anyways, long answer, but great question.
Thank you. And we actually have another one for you. So can you also talk about protecting IP as you build your MVP and socialize it with customers?
Yeah, great question. I'm not an IP expert, but I've done a lot of activity with IP. Talking to IP attorneys or patent attorneys is probably the best way to go. With your product, it depends on your product. My domain expertise is in software, technology, and data. It's very hard to protect software, technology, and data because you can look at what something looks like and code it a completely different way. And if you're 15% different or whatever it is, again, don't quote me on these things, you're not infringing. There are some elements that can be very proprietary, whether they're algorithms or unique ways of doing things in your industry to achieve an outcome. Again, IP experts or patent attorneys can walk you through those processes. What I've found is that, when you're going in the early stages and you're not and investing into patents or investing into IP protection is not the highest priority, trying to make sure that there are NDAs in place for your customer advisory boards, putting some documents together so that, truly you have some level of protection, and understanding. It's more about understanding with one another of who you're sharing your information with. When you release a product, you can release it in sort of an alpha beta production phased way with your features. And very early on in the process, even in the R&D side, you can put these customer advisory boards together that will help, drive what the product is, even from the ideation side of it. Customer advisory boards, you have some more, controls, and you can get agreements signed and things like that. Alpha is a closed production where it's like I'm very specific with the people that I'm interacting with there. Beta is maybe a limited production, and maybe you're holding back some of that IP. But ultimately, what you have to ask yourself is the limited resources I have today to get to the next business objective I need to achieve, are those limited resources best spent protecting my IP? And depending on your industry and your product, that answer may be yes. Depending on your industry and your product, the answer may be no. And the best way to protect it is to move quickly, right? And be ahead of the competition. So you have to evaluate that, but hopefully that answers a little bit of your question from my experience and thoughts.
Thanks. Thanks so
If
much.
you would like a little more information on that as well, we do actually have a recorded OpenUp called Applying for a Patent. It's with a patent attorney named Bao Tran. So if you go onto our website and look under our programs, like I said, it's just called OpenUp Applying for a Patent. It's about an hour long, and you can go ahead and watch that for more information on patenting as well. So does
Yeah, that was
anybody
very
else
helpful.
have, oh, sorry, continue.
That session was very helpful too. Thank you.
Oh, great. Oh, I'm happy that you watched it. Okay, great. Does anybody else have any questions for Nick?
Thanks, Nick. Look forward
Are
to
there
talking to you.
any programs with Nick hosting in terms of extending the session?
We don't have anything absolutely planned yet, but we will be in communication with Nick for things in the future. So we will be sending emails out about dates and what other things that he'll be covering in different webinars and whatnot. So just keep your eyes peeled for that.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much,
And
everyone.
we'll,
Oh,
really
go
quick,
ahead.
we'll also make sure that everybody that registered and attended today gets our MVP checklist. Again, we don't say we're perfect on everything that we do, but we're in the right direction. And so if you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out. I'm available. Just let me know that you were on the session, and I try to be as responsive as possible. So
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Nick.
man.
As he said,
Thank you.
I'll be sending out an email with all of that information by the end of the day today. So be on the lookout for that as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.